close to midnight, and something evil's lurking in the dark. Under the moonlight, you see a sight that almost stops your heart. You try to scream, but terror takes us out before you're naked. Yeah, you start to freeze as horror looks you right between the eyes. You're paralyzed, 'cause this is thriller night, and no one's gonna save you from the beast that's about to strike. You know it's thriller night, and fighting for your life inside a killer thriller tonight. You hear the door slam and realize that there's nowhere left to run. You feel the cold hands and wonder if you'll ever see the sun. You close your eyes and hope that this is just imagination, girl. But all the while, you hear a creature creeping up behind, and you're out of time. 'Cause this is thriller night. There ain't no second chance to kiss a thing with 40 eyes, girl. Thriller night. You're fighting for your life inside a killer thriller tonight. Night creatures crawling, the dead start to walk in their masquerade. No, there's no escaping the jaws of this alien tonight. This is the end of your life. Come on. Thriller night, 'cause I can thrill you more than any ghouls would ever dare try. Thriller night, so let me hold you tight and share a killer thriller tonight. Thriller night, girl, I can thrill you more than any ghoul would ever dare try. Thriller night, so let me hold you tight inside a killer thriller tonight. I'm gonna thrill you tonight.
Darkness falls across the land. The midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize y'all's neighborhood. And whosoever shall be found without the soul for getting down must stand and face the hounds of hell and rot inside a corpse's shell. The foulest stenches in the air, the funk of 40,000 years, and grisly ghouls from every tomb are closing in to seal your doom. And though you fight to stay alive, your body starts to shiver. For no mere mortal can resist the evil of the thriller.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Happy Halloween, Arvanauts. Welcome, everyone. Monday, October 31st, 2022. It's 10:25 p.m., and I hope you're ready, chat. I hope you're ready for our annual Halloween reading. I am very excited for this. I really love doing this every year. And we are back with two, not one, but two Edgar Allan Poe works, classics, beginning with The Fall of the House of Usher and finishing, as we always do on our Halloween readings, with The Raven. Very excited for this. I hope everyone had a good Halloween today. Yes, that's right. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. One of the things people often forget about Poe is that Poe was not only a master of the horror story, of course, but was also really the creator in a lot of ways of the detective story. Murders of the Rue Morgue, The Purloined Letter, there are numerous other examples of this. He was also a great adventure story writer. I mean, like, Poe is arguably one of the greatest short story writers of all time, like top 5. He's that good. And I say this every year that I think Poe is actually, if anything, underrated. I feel the same way about Charles Dickens because everybody knows him, but everyone's just like, oh yeah, he did all the horror stuff. Like, no, he was ridiculous how good he was. But yes, we are there, so it's very cool. Oh, that's awesome, Triffid. Yeah, the Thriller, I love that cover. First of all, Thriller's a great song, but I love that cover by Duende. Absolutely great. It's just incredibly. Inarguably, yeah. Well, the reason, yeah. I mean, I'd have to think about it because there are some phenomenal short story writers. But he's got to be up there. Like, he's got to be. Yeah, he's pretty incredible. Anyway, it's good to see everybody. I will make the usual channel stuff quick because I'm going to go through this, of course, tomorrow. If you have not already done so, please follow the channel. Please check out our YouTube with !ArvTube. Please subscribe to us over there as well. Please check us out on Discord and please join us there, !ArvCord. Please follow me over on Twitter with !ArvTweets. Website, arvaneleron.com. Financially, !ArvShop for the merchandise area, !ArvTrayon for the Patreon, which is really the financial backbone of the channel. And of course, subbing to the channel, as many of you did today, subbing and resubbing. Darken Wolf, I feel like Darken Wolf always subs, and I feel like Darken Wolf is always here. I'm pretty sure you've been here, Darken Wolf, for like the last 5 or 6 of these at least, and always subs to us on this day, and it's always awesome to see it. So welcome, Darken Wolf. And thank you, everybody who subbed and resubbed today. I saw you all, and thank you so much. You can do that and get those custom sub badges and emotes and all that good stuff used everywhere across Twitch. That is always appreciated. Please spread the word about the show while you're doing that. Publishing wise, !Icarus for my Icarus graphic novel from the amazing Athos Arts. !Library for my Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library, my 5e adventure and source book from the amazing Alligator Alley into Entertainment. And Grayshade, !Grayshade for my Grayshade novel from the aforementioned amazing Athos Arts. For Renegade and Heretic pre-orders. Renegade, I'm just about finished with my revision that'll be coming to Emily in the next few days. And then Emily will be doing her amazing edit work with that. That is going to be coming out next year. Heretic will be the year after that. And of course, save that Twitch Prime for this event. Oh, it's awesome, Dark, and I really appreciate that, actually. And then the tabletop role-playing game designed by Brandon O'Brien will be next year. And the audiobook of Grayshade done by our very own Trent Sparks. You can find that all on !Grayshade. Please do that. Please as well support our other causes. !BLM, Black Lives Matter. Very important to affirm and assert the significance and importance of Black lives. !Help Now, the World Health Organization page on suicide prevention. Please reach out to others when you need help and reach out to others when they need help as well. And Ukraine, Ukraine, to help the fine people of Ukraine as they fight back against an illegal and illegitimate war. They are doing so bravely and with courage, but it is a devastating war, and it's a symbolic support of not just them, but those who fight against oppression everywhere across the world. So please consider jumping on board and supporting them also. I have put together my full schedule and for November. It's mostly together, actually, and I will go over it tomorrow, but I'm not going to do that tonight, other than to say that I've mostly put it together. But tonight, what we're here for, of course, is the amazing and awesome Edgar Allan Poe reading. And so with no further ado, welcome. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. I hope everyone's doing well, and I hope you are looking forward to today's little experience. It's going to be a good time. Now, who is that? Who am I? So a couple notes about this, by the way. So I have read William Wilson from Edgar Allan Poe. I have read The Cask of Amontillado. I have read Murders of the Rue Morgue. I've read The Pit and the Pendulum. I've read The Telltale Heart, and I've read The Black Cat. I'm pretty sure those are the 6 that I've read, I believe. And as I say, I always do Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, I always do The Raven. So that one's the one that we're going to finish with. I always do that. But then I always try to do a new Poe story every year. And so this one is one that's a little bit longer. I'm supposed to say the thriller. Oh, sorry, the thriller. The evil that exists. So today we are going to be doing The Fall of the House of Usher, which is a great story. It has been said by experts that this story is basically a Gothic novel compressed into a short story. So if you want to know like the experience of the Gothic and just be like, what is the Gothic about? this is it. It's not a bunch of Evanescence songs. It's this story that you're about to hear. We're going to be joined in this effort by the incredible Kevin MacLeod. Kevin MacLeod with the Halloween playlist of 5 songs: Inner Sanctum, Metaphysic, Zombie Chase, This House, and Unseen Horrors. This is all Creative Commons licensed and all that, so it's free to do that. So I'm excited. Yeah, wake me up. You've been following since Legend of Heroes Treasures in the Sky, 2015. That doesn't surprise me, Darkin. Yeah, it's been a while. Thank you, Mrs. Dunsel. I went back and forth on whether to go with orange or whether to go with purple, and I was like, you know what? I think this is where it's at. So we're going to do this. We're going to get our echo machine going on, and then we are going to read the amazingness of the fall of the House of Usher. This is all, of course, in the public domain now. And so this is going to be coming to you from, let's do this over here. This is going to be coming to you from Poe Stories, which I definitely recommend. Poe Stories is what this is going to be coming from. So definitely make sure to check that out if you were interested in more of those. Yeah, no fog machine. Sorry, no fog machine. But here we go. So we're going to do The Fall of the House of Usher. This was published in 1839. And very, very cool stories. The question I have for chat is, chat, are you ready for the fall of the House of Usher? Are you prepared? Settle in. That's true. I hadn't thought of that, Arudno. Good to see you. Settle in, maybe a cup of hot cocoa, perhaps some candy. Yeah, I'm going to be singing this entire story in the voice of Usher, Dragonspear, you know. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day. No, I'm not going to do that. So here we go. It starts with a quote. Son cœur est un luth suspendu. Si toi qu'on les touche, il résonne, by de Barraget. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy House of Usher. I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable, because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium, the bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. What was it? I paused to think. What was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? It was a mystery all insoluble, nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that while, beyond doubt, there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. It was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify or perhaps to annihilate its capacity for sorrowful impression. And, acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling, and gazed down, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge and the ghastly tree stems, and the vacant and eye-like windows. Nevertheless, in this mansion of gloom, I now propose to myself a sojourn of some weeks. Its proprietor, Roderick Usher, had been one of my boon companions in boyhood, but many years had elapsed since our last meeting. A letter, however, had lately reached me in a distant part of the country, a letter from him, which, in its wildly importunate nature, had admitted of no other than a personal reply. The MS gave evidence of nervous agitation. The writer spoke of acute bodily illness, of a mental disorder which oppressed him, and of an earnest desire to see me as his best, and indeed his only personal friend, with a view of attempting, by the cheerfulness of my society, some alleviation of his malady. It was the manner in which all this and much more was said, it the apparent heart that went with his request, which allowed me no room for hesitation, and I accordingly obeyed forthwith what I still considered a very singular summons. Although as boys we had been even intimate associates, yet I really knew little of my friend. His reserve had been always excessive and habitual. I was aware, however, that his very ancient family had been noted, time out of mind, for a particular sensibility of temperament, displaying itself through long ages in many works of exalted art, and manifested of late in repeated deeds of munificent yet unobtrusive charity, as well as in a passionate devotion to the intricacies, perhaps even more than to the orthodox and easily recognizable beauties, of musical science. I had learned, too, the very remarkable fact that the stem of the Usher race, all time-honored as it was, had put forth at no period any enduring branch. In other words, that the entire family lay in the direct line of descent, and had always, with very trifling and very temporary variations, so lain. It was this deficiency, I considered, while running over in thought the perfect keeping of the character of the premises with the accredited character of the people, and while speculating upon the possible influence which the one, in the long lapse of centuries, might have exercised upon the other. It was this deficiency, perhaps, of collateral issue, and the consequent undeviating transmission from sire to son of the patrimony within the name, which had at length so identified the two as to merge the original title of the estate in the quaint and equivocal appellation of the House of Usher, an appellation which seemed to include, in the minds of the peasantry who used it, both the family and the family mansion. I have said that the sole effect of my somewhat childish experiment, that of looking down within the tarn, had been to deepen the first singular impression. There can be no doubt that the consciousness of the rapid increase of my superstition, for why should I not so term it, served mainly to accelerate the increase itself. Such, I have long known, is the paradoxical law of all sentiments having terror as a basis. And it might have been for this reason only that, when I again uplifted my eyes to the house itself from its image in the pool, there grew in my mind a strange fancy, a fancy so ridiculous, indeed, that I but mention it to show the vivid force of the sensations which oppressed me. I had so worked upon my imagination as really to believe that about the whole mansion and domain there hung an atmosphere peculiar to themselves in their immediate vicinity, an atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees and the gray wall and the silent tarn, a pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream, I scanned more narrowly the real aspect of the building. Its principal feature seemed to be that of an excessive antiquity. The discoloration of ages had been great. Minute fungi overspread the whole exterior, hanging in a fine tangled webwork from the eaves. Yet all this was apart from any extraordinary dilapidation. No portion of the masonry had fallen, and there appeared to be a wild inconsistency between its still perfect adaptation of parts and the crumbling condition of the individual stones. In this there was much that reminded me of the specious totality of old woodwork which has rotted for long years in some neglected vault, with no disturbance from the breath of the external air. Beyond this indication of extensive decay, however, the fabric gave little token of instability. Perhaps the eye of a scrutinizing observer might have discovered a barely perceptible fissure, which, extending from the roof of the building in front, made its way down the wall in a zigzag direction until it became lost in the sullen waters of the tarn. Noticing these things, I rode over a short causeway to the house. A servant in waiting took my horse, and I entered the Gothic archway of the hall. A valet of steady step thence conducted me in silence through many dark and intricate passages in my progress to the studio of his master. Much that I encountered on the way contributed, I know not how, to heighten the vague sentiments of which I have already spoken, while the objects around me, while the carvings of the ceilings, the somber tapestries of the walls, the ebon blackness of the floors, and the phantasmagoric armorial trophies which rattled as I strode were but matters to which, or to such as which, I had been accustomed from my infancy, while I hesitated not to acknowledge how familiar was all this, I still wondered to find how unfamiliar were the fancies which ordinary images were stirring up. On one of the staircases, I met the physician of the family. His countenance, I thought, wore a mingled expression of low cunning and perplexity. He accosted me with trepidation and passed on. The valet now threw open a door and ushered me into the presence of his master. The room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. The windows were long, narrow, and pointed, and at so vast a distance from the black oaken floor as to be altogether inaccessible from within. Feeble gleams of encrimsoned light made their way through the trellised panes, and served to render sufficiently distinct the more prominent objects around. The eye, however, struggled in vain to reach the remoter angles of the chamber, or the recesses of the vaulted and fretted ceiling. Dark draperies hung upon the walls. The general furniture was profuse, comfortless, antique, and tattered. Many books and musical instruments lay scattered about, but failed to give any vitality to the scene. I felt that I breathed an atmosphere of sorrow. An air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all. Upon my entrance, Usher arose from a sofa on which he had been lying at full length, and greeted me with a vivacious warmth which had much in it, I at first thought, of an overdone cordiality, of the constrained effort of the ennui man of the world. A glance, however, at his countenance convinced me of his perfect sincerity. We sat down, and for some moments, while he spoke not, I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. Surely, man had never before so terribly altered in so brief a period as had Roderick Usher. It was with difficulty that I could bring myself to admit the identity of the wan being before me with the companion of my early boyhood. Yet the character of his face had been at all times remarkable. A cadaverousness of complexion, an eye large, liquid, and luminous beyond comparison, lips somewhat thin and very pallid, but of a surpassingly beautiful curve, a nose of a delicate Hebrew model, but with a breadth of nostril unusual in similar formulations, a finely molded chin, speaking, in its want of prominence, of a want of moral energy, hair of a more than web-like softness and tenuity. These features, with an inordinate expansion above the regions of the temple, made up altogether a countenance not easily to be forgotten. And now, in the mere exaggeration of the prevailing character of these features and of the expression they were wont to convey, lay so much of change that I doubted to whom I spoke. The now ghastly pallor of the skin, and the now miraculous luster of the eve, above all things startled and even awed me. The silken hair, too, had been suffered to grow all unheeded, and as, in its wild gossamer texture, it floated rather than fell about the face, I could not, even with effort, connect its arabesque expression with any idea of simple humanity. In the manner of my friend, I was at once struck with an incoherence, an inconsistency, and I soon found this to arise from a series of feeble and futile struggles to overcome a habitual trepidancy, an excessive nervous agitation. For something of this nature I had indeed been prepared, no less by his letter than by reminiscence of certain boyish traits, and by conclusions deduced from his peculiar physical conformation and temperament. His action was alternately vivacious and sullen. His voice varied rapidly from a tremulous indecision, when the animal spirits seemed utterly in abeyance, to that species of energetic concision, that abrupt, weighty, unhurried, and hollow-sounding enunciation, that leaden, self-balanced, and perfectly modulated guttural utterance which may be observed in the lost drunkard or the irreclaimable eater of opium during the periods of his most intense excitement. It was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit, of his earnest desire to see me, and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a constitutional and a family evil, and one for which he despaired to find a remedy. A mere nervous affection, he immediately added, which would undoubtedly soon pass off. It displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. Some of these, as he detailed them, interested and bewildered me, although perhaps the terms and the general manner of the narration had their weight. He suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses. The most insipid food was alone endurable. He could wear only garments of certain texture. The odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light, and there were but peculiar sounds, and these from stringed instruments, which did not inspire him with horror. To an anomalous species of terror I found him a bounden slave. "I shall perish," said he. "I must perish in this deplorable folly. Thus, and not otherwise shall I be lost. I dread the events of the future, not in themselves, but in their results. I shudder at the thought of any, even the most trivial incident which may operate upon this intolerable agitation of soul. I have indeed no abhorrence of danger, except in its absolute effect, in terror. In this unnerved, in this pitiable condition, I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason together in some struggle with the grim phantasm, fear." I learned, moreover, at intervals and through broken and equivocal hints, another singular feature of his mental condition. He was enchained by certain superstitious impressions in regard to the dwelling which he tenanted, and whence for many years he had never ventured forth, in regard to an influence whose supposititious force was conveyed in terms too shadowy here to be restated, an influence which some peculiarities in the mere form and substance of his family mansion had, by dint of long sufferance, he said, obtained over his spirit, an effect which the physique of the grey walls and turrets, and of the dim tarn into which they all looked down, had at length brought about upon the morale of his existence. He admitted, however, although with hesitation, that much of the peculiar gloom which thus afflicted him could be traced to a more natural and far more palpable origin, to the severe and long-continued illness, indeed, to the evidently approaching dissolution of a tenderly beloved sister, his sole companion for long years, his last and only relative on earth. "Her decease," he said, with a bitterness which I can never forget, "would leave him the hopeless and the frail, the last of the ancient race of the Ushers." While he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so was she called, passed slowly through a remote portion of the apartment, and, without having noticed my presence, disappeared. I regarded her with an utter astonishment not unmingled with dread, and yet I found it impossible to account for such feelings. A sensation of stupor oppressed me as my eyes followed her retreating steps. When a door at length closed upon her, my glance sought instinctively and eagerly the countenance of the brother, but he had buried his face in his hands, and I could only perceive that a far more than ordinary wanness had overspread the emaciated fingers through which trickled many passionate tears. The disease of the Lady Madeline had long since baffled the skill of her physicians. A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person, and frequent, although transient, affections of a partially cataleptical character were the unusual diagnosis. Hitherto she had steadily borne up against the pressure of her malady, and had not betaken herself finally to bed. But on the closing in of the evening of my arrival at the house, she succumbed, as her brother told me at night with inexpressible agitation, to the prostrating power of the destroyer, and I learned that the glimpse I had obtained of her person would thus probably be the last I should obtain, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more. For several days ensuing, her name was unmentioned by either Usher or myself, and during this period I was busied in earnest endeavors to alleviate the melancholy of my friend. We painted and read together, or I listened as if in a dream to the wild improvisations of his speaking guitar. And thus, as a closer and still intimacy admitted me more unreservedly into the recesses of his spirit, the more bitterly did I perceive the futility of all attempt at cheering a mind from which darkness, as if an inherent positive quality, poured forth upon all objects of the moral and physical universe in one unceasing radiation of gloom. I shall ever bear about me a memory of the many solemn hours I thus spent alone with the master of the house of Usher. Yet I should fail in any attempt to convey an idea of the exact character of the studies or of the occupations in which he involved me or led me the way. An excited and highly distempered ideality threw a sulphureous luster over all. His long improvised dirges will ring forever in my ears. Among other things, I hold painfully in mind a certain singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of von Weber. From the paintings over which his elaborate fancy brooded, and which grew, touch by touch, into vaguenesses at which I shuddered the more thrillingly because I shuddered knowing not why. From these paintings, vivid as their images now are before me, I would in vain endeavor to adduce more than a small portion which should lie within the compass of merely written words. By the utter simplicity, by the nakedness of his designs, he arrested and overawed attention. If ever mortal painted an idea, that mortal was Roderick Usher. For me, at least, in the circumstances then surrounding me, there arose out of the pure abstractions which the hypochondriac contrived to throw upon his canvas an intensity of intolerable awe, no shadow of which felt I ever yet in the contemplation of the certainly glowing yet too concrete reveries of Fuseli. One of the phantasmagoric conceptions of my friend, partaking not so rigidly of the spirit of abstraction, may be shadowed forth, although feebly, in words. A small picture presented the interior of an immensely long and rectangular vault or tunnel, with low walls, smooth, white, and without interruption or device. Certain accessory points of the design served well to convey the idea that this excavation lay at an exceeding depth below the surface of the earth. No outlet was observed in any portion of its vast extent, and no torch or other artificial source of light was discernible, yet a flood of intense rays rolled throughout and bathed the whole in a ghastly and inappropriate splendor. I have just spoke of that morbid condition of the auditory nerve which rendered all music intolerable to the sufferer, with the exception of certain effects of stringed instruments. It was perhaps the narrow limits to which he thus confined himself upon the guitar, which gave birth, in great measure, to the fantastic character of his performances. but the fervid facility of his impromptus could not be so accounted for. They must have been and were in the notes as well in the words of his wild fantasias, for he not unfrequently accompanied himself with rhymed verbal improvisations, the result of that intense mental collectedness and concentration to which I have previously alluded as observable only in particular moments of the highest artificial excitement. The words of one of these rhapsodies I have easily remembered. I was perhaps the more forcibly impressed with it as he gave it, because in the utter or mystic current of its meaning, I fancied that I perceived, and for the first time, a full consciousness on the part of Usher of the tottering of his lofty reason upon her throne. The verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, ran very nearly, if not accurately, thus. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious, golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day along the ramparts bloomed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne where sitting Porphyrin Ogene, in state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace store, through which came flowing, 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 and sparkling evermore, a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing in voices of surpassing beauty the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate, and let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed now is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed now. And travelers now within that valley, through the red-litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a rapid ghastly river through the pale door a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more. I well remember that suggestions arising from this ballad led us into a train of thought wherein there became manifest an opinion of Usher's which I mention not so much on account of its novelty, for other men have thought thus, as on account of the pertinacity with which he maintained it. This opinion in its general form was that of the sentience of all vegetable things. But in his disordered fancy, the idea had assumed a more daring character, and trespassed under certain conditions upon the kingdom of inorganization. I lack words to express the full extent or the earnest abandon of his persuasion. The belief, however, was connected, as I have previously hinted, with the gray stones of the homes of his forefathers. The conditions of the sentience had been here, he imagined, fulfilled in the method of collocation of these stones, in the order of their arrangement, as well as that in the many fungi which overspread them, and of the decayed trees which stood around. Above all, in the long undisturbed endurance of this arrangement, and in its reduplication in the still waters of the tarn. Its evidence, the evidence of the sentience, was to be seen, he said, and I here started as he spoke, in the gradual yet certain condensation of an atmosphere of their own about the waters and the walls. The result was discoverable, he added, in that silent yet importunate and terrible influence which for centuries had molded the destinies of his family, and which made him what I now saw him, what he was. Such opinions need no comment, and I will make none. Our books, the books which for years had formed no small portion of the mental existence of the invalid, were, as might be supposed, in strict keeping with this character of phantasm. We pored together over such works as the Verte Chartreuse of Gresset, the Belle Figure of Machiavelli, the Heaven and Hell of Swedenborg, the Subterranean Voyage of Nicholas Klim by Holberg, the Chiromancy of Robert Flood, of Jean de Dindalgin and of de Duchambre, the Journey into the Blue Distance of Tieck, and the City of the Sun of Campanella. One favorite volume was a small octavo edition of the Directorium Inquisitorum by the Dominican Aymeric de Gironne, and there were passages in Pomponius Mela about the old African satyrs and Egyptians over which Usher would sit dreaming for hours. His chief delight, however, was found in the perusal of an exceedingly rare and curious book in quarto Gothic, the Manual of a Forgotten Church, the Vigilae Mortuorum Secundum Coram Ecclesiae Maguntinae. I could not help thinking of the wild ritual of this work, and of its probable influence upon the hypochondriac when, one evening, having informed me abruptly that the Lady Madeline was no more, he stated his intention of preserving her corpse for a fortnight previously to its final interment in one of the numerous vaults within the main walls of the building. The worldly reason, however, assigned for this singular proceeding was one which I did not feel at liberty to dispute. The brother had been led to his resolution, so he told me, by consideration of the unusual character of the malady of the deceased, of certain obtrusive and eager inquiries on the part of her medical men, and of the remote and exposed situation of the burial ground of the family. I will not deny that when I called to mind the sinister countenance of the person whom I met upon the staircase on the day of my arrival at the house, I had no desire now to oppose what I regarded as, at best, but a harmless and by no means an unnatural precaution. At the request of Usher, I personally aided him in the arrangements for the temporary entombment. The body having been encoffined, we two alone bore it to its rest. The vault in which we placed it, and which had been so long unopened that our torches, half smothered in its oppressive atmosphere, gave us little opportunity for investigation, was small, damp, and entirely without means of admission for light, lying at great depth immediately beneath that portion of the building in which was my own sleeping apartment. It had been used, apparently in remote feudal times, for the worst purposes of a dungeon keep, and in later days as a place of deposit for powder or some other highly combustible substance as a portion of its floor, and the whole interior of a long archway through which we reached it were carefully sheathed with copper. The door of massive iron had been also similarly protected. Its immense weight caused an unusually sharp grating sound as it moved upon its hinges. Having deposited our mournful burden upon trestles within this region of horror, we partially turned aside the yet unscrewed lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. A striking similitude between the brother and sister now first arrested my attention, and Usher, divining perhaps my thoughts, murmured out some few words from which I learned that the deceased and himself had been twins, and that sympathies of a scarcely intelligible nature had always existed between them. Our glances, however, rested not long upon the dead, for we could not regard her unawed. The disease which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of youth had left, as usual in all maladies of a strictly cataleptical character, the mockery of a faint plush upon the bosom and the face, and that suspiciously lingering smile upon the lip, which is so terrible in death. We replaced and screwed down the lid, and having secured the door of iron, made our way with toll into the scarcely less gloomy apartments of the upper portion of the house. And now, some days of bitter grief having elapsed, an observable change came over the features of the mental disorder of my friend. His ordinary manner had vanished. His ordinary occupations were neglected or forgotten. He roamed from chamber to chamber with hurried, unequal, and objectless step. The pallor of his countenance had assumed, if possible, a more ghastly hue, but the luminousness of his eye had utterly gone out. The once occasional huskiness of his tone was heard no more, and a tremulous quaver, as if of extreme terror, habitually characterized his utterance. There were times, indeed, when I thought his unceasingly agitated mind was laboring with some oppressive secret, to divulge which he struggled for the necessary courage. At times, again, I was obliged to resolve all into the mere inexplicable vagaries of madness, for I beheld him gazing upon vacancy for long hours in an attitude of the profoundest attention, as if listening to some imaginary sound. It was no wonder that his condition terrified, that it infected me. I felt creeping upon me by slow yet certain degrees the wild influences of his own fantastic yet impressive superstitions. It was especially upon retiring to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day after the placing of the Lady Madeline within the dungeon, that I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep came not near my couch while the hours waned and waned away. I struggled to reason off the nervousness which had dominion over me. I endeavored to believe that much, if not all of what I felt, was due to the bewildering influence of the gloomy furniture of the room, of the dark and tattered draperies which, tortured into motion by the breath of a rising tempest, swayed fitfully to and fro upon the walls and rustled uneasily about the decorations of the bed. But my efforts were fruitless. And An irrepressible tremor gradually pervaded my frame, and at length there sat upon my very heart an incubus of utterly causeless alarm. Shaking this off with a gasp and a struggle, I uplifted myself upon the pillows, and peering earnestly within the intense darkness of the chamber, hearkened, I know not why, except that an instinctive spirit prompted me, to certain low and indefinite sounds which came through the pauses of the storm at long intervals, I knew not whence. Overpowered by an intense sentiment of horror, unaccountable yet unendurable, I threw on my clothes with haste, for I felt that I should sleep no more during the night, and endeavored to arouse myself from the pitiable condition into which I had fallen by pacing rapidly to and fro through the apartment. I had taken but few turns in this manner when a light step on an adjoining staircase arrested my attention. I presently recognized it as that of Usher. In an instant afterward he rapped with a gentle touch at my door, and entered bearing a lamp. His countenance was, as usual, cadaverously wan, but, moreover, there was a species of mad hilarity in his eyes, and evidently restrained hysteria in his whole demeanor. His air appalled me, but anything was preferable to the solitude which I had so long endured, and I even welcomed his presence as a relief. "And you have not seen it?" he said abruptly, after having stared about him for some moments in silence. "You have not then seen it? But stay, you shall." Thus speaking, and having carefully shaded his lamp, he hurried to one of the casements and threw it freely open to the storm. The impetuous fury of the entering gust nearly lifted us from our feet. It was indeed a tempestuous yet sternly beautiful night, and one wildly singular in its terror and its beauty. A whirlwind had apparently collected its force in our vicinity, for there were frequent and violent alterations in the direction of the wind, and the exceeding density of the clouds, which hung so low as to press upon the turrets of the house, did not prevent our perceiving the lifelike velocity with which they flew careering from all points against each other, without passing away into the distance. I say that even their exceeding density did not prevent our perceiving this, yet we had no glimpse of the moon or stars, nor was there any flashing forth of the lightning. But the under surfaces of the huge masses of agitated vapor, as well as all terrestrial objects immediately around us, were glowing in the unnatural light of a faintly luminous and distinctly visible gaseous exhalation which hung about and enshrouded the mansion. "You must not, you shall not behold this," said I, shudderingly to Usher as I led him with a gentle violence from the window to a seat. "These appearances which bewilder you are merely electrical phenomena, not uncommon, or it may be that they have their ghastly origin in the rank miasma of the tarn. Let us close this casement. The air is chilling and dangerous to your frame. Here is one of your favorite romances. I will read and you shall listen, and so we will pass away this terrible night together." The antique volume which I had taken up was the Mad Tryst of Sir Launcelot Canning, but I had called it a favorite of Usher's more in sad jest than in earnest, for in truth there is little in its uncouth and unimaginative prolixity which could have interest for the lofty and spiritual ideality of my friend. It was, however, the only book immediately at hand, and I indulged a vague hope that the excitement which now agitated the hypochondriac might find relief, for the history of mental disorder is full of similar anomalies, even the extremeness of the folly which I should read. Could I have judged, indeed, by the wild, overstrained air of vivacity with which he hearkened, or apparently hearkened, to the words of the tale, I might well have congratulated myself upon the success of my design. I had arrived at the well-known portion of the story where Ethelred, the hero of the tryst, having sought in vain for peaceable admission into the dwelling of the hermit, proceeds to make good an entrance by force. Here, it will be remembered, the words of the narrative run thus: "And Ethelred, who was by nature of a doughty heart, and who was now mighty withal on account of the powerfulness of the wine which he had drunken, waited no longer to hold parley with the hermit, who in sooth was of an obstinate and maliceful turn, but, feeling the rain upon his shoulders, and fearing the rising of the tempest, uplifted his mace outright, and, with blows, made quickly room in the plankings of the door for his gauntleted hand, and now pulling there with sturdily, he so cracked and ripped and tore all asunder that the noise of the dry and hollow-sounding wood alarumed and reverberated throughout the forest. At the termination of this sentence I started, and for a moment paused, for it appeared to me, although I at once concluded that my excited fancy had deceived me, it appeared to me that from some very remote portion of the mansion there came, indistinctly to my ears, what might have been, in an exact similarity of character, the echo, but a stifled and dull one certainly, of the very cracking and ripping sound which Sir Launcelot had so particularly described. It was beyond doubt the coincidence alone which had arrested my attention, for amid the rattling of the sashes of the casements and the ordinary commingled noises of the still increasing storm, the sound in itself had nothing, surely, which should have interested or disturbed me. I continued the story. But the good champion Ethelred, now entering within the door, was sore enraged and amazed to perceive no signal of the maliceful hermit, but in the stead thereof a dragon of a scaly and prodigious demeanor, and of a fiery tongue, which sate in guard before a palace of gold with a floor of silver. And upon the wall there hung a shield of shining brass with this legend enwritten: Who entereth herein a conqueror hath been, who slayeth the dragon, the shield he shall win. And Ethelred uplifted his mace, and struck upon the head of the dragon, which fell before him, and gave up his pesty breath, with a shriek so horrid and harsh, and withal so piercing, that Ethelred had feigned to close his ears with his hands against the dreadful noise of it, the like whereof was never before heard. Here again I paused abruptly, and now with a feeling of wild amazement, for there could be no doubt whatever that in this instance I did actually hear, although from what direction it proceeded I found it impossible to say, a low and apparently distant, but harsh, protracted, and most unusual screaming or grating sound, the exact counterpart of what my fancy had already conjured up for the dragon's unnatural shriek as described by the romancer. Oppressed as I certainly was upon the occurrence of the second and most extraordinary coincidence by 1,000 conflicting sensations in which wonder and extreme terror were predominant, I still retained sufficient presence of mind to avoid exciting by any observation the sensitive nervousness of my companion. I was by no means certain that he had noticed the sounds in question, although assuredly a strange alteration had during the last few minutes taken place in his demeanor. From a position fronting my own, he had gradually brought round his chair so as to sit with his face to the door of the chamber, and thus I could but partially perceive his features, although I saw that his lips trembled as if he were murmuring inaudibly. His head had dropped upon his breast, yet I knew that he was not asleep from the wide and rigid opening of the eye as I caught a glance of it in profile. The motion of his body, too, was at variance with this idea, for he rocked from side to side with a gentle yet constant and uniform sway. Having rapidly taken notice of all this, I resumed the narrative of Sir Launcelot, which thus proceeded. And now the champion, having escaped from the terrible fury of the dragon, bethinking himself of the brazen shield and of the breaking up of the enchantment which was upon it, removed the carcass from out of the way before him, and approached valorously over the silver pavement of the castle to where the shield was upon the wall, which in sooth tarried not for his full coming, but fell down at his feet upon the silver floor with a mighty great and terrible ringing sound. No sooner had these syllables passed my lips than, as if a shield of brass had indeed at the moment fallen heavily upon a floor of silver, became aware of a distinct, hollow, metallic, and clangorous yet apparently muffled reverberation. Completely unnerved, I leaped to my feet, but the measured rocking movement of Usher was undisturbed. I rushed to the chair in which he sat. His eyes were bent fixedly before him, and throughout his whole countenance there reigned a stony rigidity. But as I placed my hand upon his shoulder, there came a strong shudder over his whole person. A sickly smile quivered about his lips, and I saw that he spoke in a low, hurried, and gibbering murmur, as if unconscious of my presence. Bending closely over him, I at length drank in the hideous import of his words. "Not hear it? Yes, I hear it, and have heard it," Long, 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 many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, yet I dared not. Oh, pity me, miserable wretch that I am. I dared not speak. We have put her living in the tomb. Said I not that my senses were acute? I now tell you that I heard her first feeble movements in the hollow coffin. I heard them many, many days ago, yet I dared not speak. And now, tonight, the breaking of the hermit's door, and the death cry of the dragon, and the clangor of the shield, say rather the rending of her coffin, and the grating of the iron hinges of her prison, and her struggles within the coppered archway of the vault. Oh, whither shall I fly? Will she not be here anon? Is she not hurrying to upbraid me for my haste? Have I not heard her footstep on the stair? Do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart? Madman! Here he sprang furiously to his feet and shrieked out his syllables as if in the effort he were giving up his soul. Madman, I tell you that she now stands without the door! As if in the superhuman energy of his utterance there had been found the potency of a spell, the huge antique panels to which the speaker pointed threw slowly back upon the instant, ponderous and ebony jaws. It was the work of the rushing gust. But then without those doors there did stand the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher. There was blood upon her white robes, and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. For a moment she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold, and then, with a low, moaning cry, fell heavily inward upon the person of her brother, and in her violent and now final death agonies bore him to the floor a corpse and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated. From that chamber and from that mansion I fled aghast. The storm was still abroad in all its wrath as I found myself crossing the old causeway. Suddenly there shot along the path a wild light, and I turned to see whence a gleam so unusual could have issued, for the vast house and its shadows were alone behind me. The radiance was that of the full, setting and blood-red moon, which now shone vividly through that once barely discernible fissure of which I have before spoken as extending from the roof of the building in a zigzag direction to the base. While I gazed, this fissure rapidly widened. There came a fierce breath of the whirlwind. The entire orb of the satellite burst at once upon my sight. My brain reeled as I saw the mighty walls rushing asunder. There was a long, tumultuous shouting sound like the voice of 1,000 waters. And the deep and dark tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the house of Usher. The end. At people is how you write a short story. Thank you, thank you. I heard you behind me. It was a really very dramatic story. Thank you for the sub, Rock God. Oh, thank you, Dragon Spear. I appreciate it. Worst vacation ever, 1-star Airbnb reading. Thanks, Rock God. I appreciate it, dude. Man, Poe, every story I read of Poe, I'm just like, how is this guy so good? He's just, man, unbelievable. Thank you. Thank you very much, CQ. Yeah, the part where it's just like, and then the thing with, I'm like, you better bring it here. Because, thank you, Dragon Spear. Oh, man. My daughter, Little Arv, right now is doing science work down here. Thank you, Triffid. And so is doing reading right back there after having done stuff. The great Candy Hall. She dressed as Technoblade was her costume, so it was very good. And yeah, it was good stuff. And even got recognized once for it, so that was good. And a very good friend of hers was over hanging out with her to do it. Mini Arv went as a duck trick-or-treating. Stolen duck costume, but he was definitely a duck and was very successful in all of that. Every bit of that story is 100% possible without inventing anything that's badass. Yeah. I mean, what's so great about it is that it completely, it's one of the greatest stories ever written of combining every element together, the house, the person, and the sort of shock value of what's actually involved and how much it builds upon one's fancy so that it could, if anything, be a kind of madness, but there's always a little twist of the supernatural that comes at the end. It's lovely stuff. And this is another reason why. Oh, and Emily, thank you. I'm glad that you feel that way. I hope that the story is not actually frightening. I don't know that would be a good sleep story, but I'm glad if it gave you that feeling because, God knows that we're going to be sleeping in nice, comfortable environments that isn't this place, right? Like, oh my God, can you imagine sleeping in a place like that? Eee. All right, chat. One more for you tonight. We will, as always, finish with The Raven, and then we will wrap up and be back here tomorrow at somewhere between noon and 12:15 p.m. Eastern, but probably going to try to get to noon Eastern if I can, to possibly finish, but at least get close to the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I appreciate that, Emily. Good night. Sleep well. And so, yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Yuffie's DLC. I'm very excited to finish that up. I've been really loving it. And then we're going to be doing ActRaiser. After that is the next video game up. And then that'll be just a couple sessions, maybe 3 at most. And then Ghost of Tsushima, which I know Dragon Spear is very excited about. Yeah. Oh, God. It's just so like, woo-hoo-hoo. It's so good. All right. It's 5:27 a.m. here, but I'm still here for The Raven. All right, let's go. Now, before I stream this, before I read this chat, very important. I need any and all bird icons that you got. Any bird emotes. Obviously, we have our bird emotes, but if you have those plus any other bird emotes, if you got birds, you got ravens, you got crows, you got anything like that, show me the birds. Any kind of birds. You got some birds. Let's see birds. I'm looking birds. I want some birds. I like that, Triffid. Great funds from us, of course. Good. Excellent. Keep them going. I want some more birds. I want a whole chat full of birds for a second. I want just birds. I want a bunch of birds. Oh my God, really, Arudnell? I did not know that. Birds. Any birds from anybody. Bird emotes, bird emojis. Let's go, bird emojis. I like our bird emojis. Those are fine. But if you have other bird emojis, that's a good one, Dark and Wolf. That's a great one. Bird. Another bird. Bird is the word. Give me a few more birds. I'll take 2 more rows of birds. 2 more rows of birds. 2 more bird rows.
Dad, trust me, there's some people who are just setting up their entire chat.
No, I know. They're getting ready. They're just like, Herp. Yeah, I know.
What
It's
they're
very.
waiting for is to like, cover the entire screen with birds.
Look at these. Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about. Yeah. Although I love the image, Mrs. Dunsel, of the the parrot sub. You're like the Raven parrot's like, sob. Oh man. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I feel appropriately in the bird mood. Here we go, chat. One of the great horror poems. Nice one, dragon. That's good too. One of the what's a dragon doing in there? I guess it is flying. I wouldn't count it as a bird though. One of the great, and also flying monkey. Now that I just saw that from Golden Drake, that's funny. They did it. Quoth the Raven, like and subscribe. That's right. Quoth the Raven, smash that like button. Dragons are birds too. What? No, they're not. Dragons are wicked creatures. They're better than birds. And birds are awesome. Okay.
You have to start reading, otherwise you're going to have an entire huge debate.
It's a good point. All right, here we go. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but, with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further then he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Started at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken. "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore." But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter set, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign in parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. And there you have it, chat. The great Edgar Allan Poe with The Raven. And another year, another Halloween special has passed. Thanks, Arudno. Another Halloween has passed, and I absolutely love doing this every year. It's a lot of fun. And I hope you folks enjoyed it as much as I did. And if so, I hope you will join us tomorrow for more of this. We have a lot more story. We have a lot more tabletop role-playing to do. We have a lot more games to do, creative work to do, podcasts to run, recordings to do, and most of all, community and communication to build. So any kind of work that people can do to spread the word is very much appreciated. Thank you, Alphabet Streams. And I saw you coming in. For those of you who came in while I was in the midst of reading either of those stories, my apologies, but I didn't want to interrupt because just saying like, blah, blah, blah. Hey, what's up, Alphabet Streams? Like while I'm in the middle of doing this stuff. So thank you, everybody who came in. And please do spread the word. And you will see later this month, Alphabet Streams and Triffity Mats and Prince Prince Justin as part of our critical crafting one-shot for the Speculate fundraiser. So you'll want to do that. And there's a Rising Tides here as well. You will also see the Rising Tides there. You will also see Turbo Tangle there. Tango, not Tangle, Tango. You will also see, of course, Iori Kusano there. You will see Yoi Gawain Lin there. You will see Valerie Valdez there. We've already talked about the aforementioned Mike Underwood and Brandon and all that kind of good stuff. So, well, thank you, Brandon. That's an honor coming from you. So, really, really fun time. So, chat, we are going to close up shop for today. I'm going to be back tomorrow at noon, although I encourage you to stick around for the Duende cover of the Thriller, which, if you have not yet heard it, is well worth the price of admission. It is not good, it's great. Super good. And I am going to be back, as I say, tomorrow at noon Eastern for some Final Fantasy VII Remake, Yuffie's DLC. One thing I want to make clear, by the way, for those of you, I've often said I don't like horror. I don't like being scared, but I do like spooky. And there's a reason for that. One of the reasons that we like spooky work, one of the reasons that we like sometimes, stuff that goes bump in the night type of work, is because it is a reminder of the thin layer sometimes between our existence and whatever does or doesn't lie beyond that next stage. And it's in that moment of contemplation, of thoughtful care, of sort of consideration, that we can sometimes not only recommit ourselves to living fully in the moment, but also to a sense of courage and purpose, and the sense that we have something, depending on our belief, either that does await or doesn't await us on the other side, but that we are part of it here in the process of experiencing it this closely. To put it simply, it is on the brink without going over. And that is one thing that I really like about the spooky kind of stuff that we do in some of these sessions. So that's a big difference. Yeah, exactly. Spooky is actually horror. And I think the best horror does that. I actually think the best horror in strange ways is optimistic. And that's one of the reasons I like it. It's optimistic because of what it suggests about the way that we can be and the way that we theoretically can exist in getting close and then back. And being part of something bigger than ourselves, as Triffid points out, very well said, is true regardless of our religious belief. And that, I think, is very comforting in a lot of different ways. And so with that pleasant thought, and with the hope that many of you got to eat a little bit of candy or the equivalent, and the sense of, and I totally agree with the Rudnell and Rock God there, and with the sense of stuff that we talked about today, if you like what you saw and heard, please follow the channel. If you like the reading and so forth, please follow the Discord, the !ARV Cord. Twitter, please follow me there, !ARV Tweets. Please sub to me on my YouTube channel. You can find all the past readings of this as well. Oh, nice. I'm glad, Golden Drake. !ARV Tube. You can subscribe to me over there. arvanellarun.com is the website. !ARV Treon, that Patreon right over there, really helps us out, and support there would be much appreciated as we're starting to move our way back up there. Thank you so much as well for all of the subs tonight and the resubs. Really appreciate that. And of course, all of the cheers and all that stuff. Really appreciate that too. And of course, very, very grateful as well for the support over on the shop as well, the merchandise area, !ARV Shop. Of course, !Icarus for my Icarus graphic novel from Athos Arts, Library, Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library, 5e Adventure and Sourcebook from Alligator Alley Entertainment, and !Grayshade, which goes to dark places but also does not go over the brink. And happy Halloween too, by the way, Dark and Wolf. It's good to see you back. Grayshade, very important both for the book, for the sequels, Renegade and Heretic, coming up next year and the year after. The tabletop role-playing game being designed by the Rising Tides. It is going to be amazing. That's coming out next year. And the audiobook Dine Mr. Tren Sparks, who will be with us and is going to be doing the audiobook. I'm very excited about that too. So you can support us all with that. And lastly, as always, BLM, Black Lives Matter. Very important to affirm and assert the significance and importance of Black lives. Help Now, the World Health Organization page on suicide prevention. Important to reach out to others when you need help, and to reach out to others when they need help as well. And Ukraine, Ukraine, to help the fine people of Ukraine as they fight back against an illegal and illegitimate war. So good to see everyone here tonight. Thank you to my wonderful mods, Rudinell, Dragonspear, Rock God, Triffity Mats, and the Rising Tides. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and subscribers, Rudinell, Dragonspear, Rock God, Triffity Mats, Critchwitch, Dark and Wolf, Mrs. Dunsel. And thank you to my wonderful viewers, Alphabet Streams, Drapsnat, Galadrielbot, who's totally not a bot, Golden Drake, Harlequin, Infinity Simplex, Koala Man, and small streamers. And don't forget, yes, Christmas Carol is coming up on Friday, one of my favorite events because we get the whole crew back together. It's my favorite story. You want to talk about optimism, Christmas Carol is where it's at. What?
On Friday?
No, in December. 2 months from now. Yeah. So,
That's a bit early.
yeah, exactly. No, it wouldn't be that early. So, and chat, that is going to be it for us. No raid tonight, because it is late and because I don't usually stream Nutties, etc. But we will be back to doing that tomorrow. So I will see you tomorrow in the daytime. I will see you tomorrow in the morning time. I will see you tomorrow in the nighttime. Yes, daytime and then the afternoon time. But right now, Chad, I'm going to say goodnight. I'm going to wish you sweet dreams. I hope everybody sleeps well and that no one faces any boogeymen in the night. Nevermore.
It's close to midnight, and something evil's lurking in the dark. Under the moonlight, you see a sight that almost stops your heart. You try to scream, but terror takes us out before you're naked. Yeah, you start to freeze as horror looks you right between the eyes. You're paralyzed. 'Cause this is thriller night. And no one's gonna save you from the beast that's about to strike. You know it's thriller night. And fighting for your life inside a killer thriller tonight. You hear the door slam and realize that there's nowhere left to run. You feel the cold hands and wonder if you'll ever see the sun. You close your eyes and hope that this is just imagination, girl. But all the while, you hear a creature creeping up behind, and you're out of time. 'Cause this is thriller night. There ain't no second chance to kiss a thing with 40 eyes, girl. Thriller night. You're fighting for your life inside a killer thriller tonight. Night creatures crawling, the dead start to walk in their masquerade. No, there's no escaping the jaws of this alien tonight. This is the end of your life. Come on. Thriller night. 'Cause I can thrill you more than any ghouls would ever dare try. Thriller night. So let me hold you tight and share a killer thriller tonight. Thriller night. Girl, I can thrill you more than any ghoul would ever dare try.
darkness falls across the land. The midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize y'all's neighborhood. And whosoever shall be found without the soul for getting down must stand and face the hounds of hell and rot inside a corpse's shell. The foulest stenches in the air, the funk of 40,000 years, and grisly ghouls from every tomb are closing in to seal your doom. And though you fight to stay alive